Although it is true that advanced economies or wealthier economies are more business ready, we find a ray of hope for poor economies, for low-income economies.
Hello and welcome to Expert Answers. I'm Camilla Liu. In this episode, we'll be looking at the foundation to economic growth, the private sector. When functioning well, it generates jobs, boosts investment, and increases output. But what happens when that foundation starts to crack? Since the great financial crisis of 2008, the private sector has been struggling to regain its footing. And with the recent economic downturns, private investment in developing economies has slowed substantially. Per capita investment growth between 2023 and 2024 is barely half of the rate of the previous 2 decades. The slowdown isn't just an economic issue, it hampers countries' ability to fight poverty and tackle climate change. And these challenges are far beyond what governments can tackle alone. Having a dynamic private sector is key to solving a wide range of global challenges over the next decade. So, what does the private sector need to truly thrive? Let's find out. I'm joined here by Norman Loaiza, Director of the Worldbank's Global Indicators Group, who leads a new flagship report, Business Ready, that assesses the global business environment. Welcome to Expert Answers, Norman.
My pleasure.
But this report, Business Ready, is about private sector development. So I want to start by asking you, why is it so important that we pay attention to the private sector?
The short answer is that the private sector can be the engine of economic growth. There is great need for economic growth around the world. It is estimated that low-income economies need about 9% of GDP growth per capita to eliminate extreme poverty within the next decade. And it's also estimated that the middle-income economies need about 5% of GDP growth to overcome the middle-income trap and become advanced economies. So how is this going to happen? It can happen only if the private sector becomes re-energized, if it provides enough jobs and enough opportunities for people. Now, we may want to understand what the private sector really means. It's not just businesses. Private sector is an ecosystem that comprises businesses, workers, the environment, consumers, and even the market as a whole. When this private sector is dynamic and resilient, it can provide economic growth and job creation. Let me tell you that Business Ready is a detailed set of data that can guide policy reforms to improve the private sector as a whole. That is, to make it more efficient, to make it living by higher quality standards, and by delivering on providing jobs and investment for the economies that are involved.
Can you please share with us the biggest findings of this year's Business Ready report?
The most important finding of our report, Business Ready, or Be Ready for short, is that the world is not business ready, despite the large importance that the world has for economic growth, for job creation, and for investment. Let me unpack a bit this result. We measure in Business Ready the quality of regulations as well as the efficiency of public services that are directed at firms. And what we find is that on average, in the 50 economies that we assess in the first report, only about 3/4 of the high quality regulations are in place, and about only 50% of effective public services are well designed.
Ladies and gentlemen, may we inform you that this event will be conducted in English. For participants who require interpretation, you may collect the device. You may collect the devices provided At the registration desk, participant may borrow the translation device at the translation device desk and return it after using it. Thank you.
And in the report, it indicates that some countries perform better than others. Could you unpack a little bit? What about developing economies? How do they perform?
Although it is true that advanced economies or wealthier economies are more business ready, we find a ray of hope for poor economies, for low-income economies. In fact, there are very interesting notable exceptions, and they lead us to believe that countries do not need to be rich to have a strong business environment. And I can give you a few examples. The first is Rwanda. Rwanda performs well in 6 out of the 10 topics that span the life cycle of the firm that we measure. And it may be because of this good performance in the business environment that the country has been able to double the size of its economy in the last decade. The second example is Georgia, a country that in the last decade has grown by a rate of about 5% of GDP per capita. Now, this country performs well, as I said, being in the top 20% of 7 of the 10 topics that we measure. And the last example comes actually from Cambodia, who tops the assessment on the topic of financial services. It may be for that reason that in the last decade in Cambodia, the number of bank account policy reform, identifying the issues where economies need to work, and improve, and also the areas of strength where they can rely upon. To be more specific, as I said before, we cover 10 topics that span the life cycle of the firm. For the economies that we measure, the 50 economies, it's business entry where economies perform the best, and business insolvency and market competition where economies perform the least well. But overall, there is plenty of room for improvement.
Norman, thank you very much for being on Expert Answers and for sharing some insights from the Business Ready Report.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again to Norman for joining me on Expert Answers. Don't forget to check out the Business Ready section of the Worldbank website to learn more about this innovative report. Bye for now.
This is your guide to make this event safe, enjoyable, and sustainable. Please follow these simple guidelines to help us create a great experience for everyone. Please follow the safety and security regulations as recommended by the venue. Always be prepared and aware of the evacuation route, and make sure you know where the emergency facilities are located. During our event, it's important to follow proper etiquette to ensure a smooth and respectful experience for everyone. Please keep your phone on silent, pay attention to speakers, and participate actively. To maintain everyone's health and area cleanliness, please follow these simple tips. Wash your hands often, keep the area tidy, wear a mask if you need to, drink plenty of water, and take breaks when needed. Let's show our care for the environment by taking these simple actions. Avoid using single-use plastics to reduce waste and protect the environment. Reduce waste and food waste to minimize our environmental footprint. Minimize paper usage by maximizing digital technology and platforms. and use energy wisely to conserve resources and protect our planet. Let's take care of our environment together for small actions that make a big difference. Help us manage waste effectively at this event by sorting your waste into organic, inorganic, and residual categories. Once you have sorted your waste, it will be collected and transported to recycling facilities. Here, the segregated waste is processed into new materials, helping to create a more sustainable environment. Organic waste like food scraps and garden waste can be composted into nutrient-rich soil, used as animal feed, or crafted into eco-friendly products. Inorganic waste can be recycled into new
Ladies and
products,
gentlemen,
such as new
we
paper,
welcome
fabric
His
clothing,
Excellency.
construction materials, and many more. By sorting your waste properly, we can significantly
We welcome His Excellency Rosan Perkasa Ruslani, Minister of Investment and Downstream Industry, the Republic of Indonesia. Bapak Menteri, thank you for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, in a moment we will begin the program. Please enter the room and take your seats in the designated areas. Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the new insight on the business environment in Indonesia, exploring the Worldbank's Business Ready Report, hosted by Worldbank Group, the Ministry of Investment and Downstream Industry, Indonesian Employers Association APindo, Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, and Faculty of Economic and Business University of Indonesia. My name is Claudia Lenke, and I'm delightful to be here as the MC for this event. Ladies and gentlemen, in this 2 hour, we are going to present the Business Ready 2024 Asia, the World Bank Group's new corporate flagship, assessing the global business environment. Before we move on to the next segment of the event, let me first greet our invited guests and speakers who have joined us. Apologies. Distinguished guest, His Excellency Rosan Perkasa Roslani, Minister of Investment and Downstream Industry. Ibu Caroline Turk, World Bank Country Director for Indonesia and Timor-Leste. Mr. Norman Loaiza, Director of the Global Indicators Group, World Bank Group. His Excellency Olivier Zander, Ambassador of Switzerland to Indonesia or representing. Ibu Mari Pangestu, Vice Chairperson of the National Economic Council. Bapak Iksan Sulkarnayan, Assistant Deputy for Investment and Downstream Acceleration, Coordinating Ministry for the Economic Affairs. Ibu Sinta Kamdani, Chairperson, Indonesian Employers Association. Bapak Yose Rizal Damuri, Executive Director, Center for Strategic and International Studies. Bapak Chaikal Nuryakin, Director, Institute for Economy and Social Research, University of Indonesia. And also participants attending both in person and virtually. Once again, we would like to thank you for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to remind you once again that this session will be conducted in English. For those of you who joining us online, you can press the globe icon below to listen in Bahasa Indonesia. And for those who joining us in person, you may pick up the interpretation devices available at the translation desk. We will have a Q&A sessions at the end of the panel discussion. For the participant who wants to ask some questions, please drop your question to Slido by scanning the QR code on your table, or also to scan the QR code at the LED screen. And at the end of this event, we will have lunch and press conference for the media. Bapak Ibu sekalian, ladies and gentlemen, to begin our event today, let's now listen to the welcome remarks delivered by World Bank Country Director for Indonesia and Timor-Leste, Ibu Caroline Turk.
Difficulty fitting my paper on here. Bapak Rosan Roslani, Minister for Investment and Downstream Industry. Ibu Mari Pangestu, Vice Chairperson of the National Economic Council and somebody with a special relationship to the World Bank as well. Colleagues from government ministries, from government agencies, from research institutes, those who are interested in the private sector, Ibu Shinta, thank you for joining us from the Sintesa Group and from the Employers Association. Many thanks for being here today. It's a really great pleasure for me to welcome everybody to this event to bring new insights on the business environment in Indonesia. Through exploring the World Bank's Business Ready report. We call it Be Ready for short, and it's recently been published by the World Bank. I'm not going to talk too much right now about the results because we have whole presentations on the results and I don't want to ruin the suspense or the anticipation of what those results are. But we're joined here today by Norman Loaiza, who's from the research section of the World Bank. He's a director in the research section of the World Bank, and he runs this new instrument for gauging the favorability of the investment climate in countries around the world. It's a report which is replacing a previous set of reports that we would have done called Doing Business. Many of you may have been familiar with the Doing Business reports. These were These were wrapped up in 2021, and the World Bank embarked on a process of developing a new set of indicators that could transparently and effectively capture the opportunities and challenges that business environments set by governments around the world, how these were performing. Right now, of course, we're at a relatively unstable moment in the global economy. There has been some stabilization in global growth, but this has stabilized at a low pace. We have a fairly resilient US economy and pretty buoyant domestic demand in the East Asia region. And global growth has stabilized recently around 2.7%. So it's good that it's stable, but we have to remember that growth remains nearly half a percentage point below its average pace in the decade before COVID. And within the global economy, we see many developing economies facing high debt, slow growth in investment, and, of course, climate-related challenges. And this comes on top of the many challenges confronting the global economy that include geopolitical tensions, trade fragmentation, a decline in the growth in productivity, and that's a particular feature of emerging markets that we see. So you've got a backdrop of these challenges, and in that context, private sector ingenuity is going to be really key to driving progress and economic growth. Our flagship Business Ready, Be Ready report was launched in October 2024, and it provides governments around the world with insights to foster a more enabling environment where businesses can really thrive. Businesses can thrive, businesses can create jobs, businesses can drive innovation, and businesses can support sustainable growth. It takes a balanced, transparent approach to assessing a country's business environment, and we're happy to be able to present this to you today. Among the 50 economies that were assessed last year, nearly all of them perform better in regulatory frameworks than they do in public services that facilitate compliance with business frameworks. On average, economies around the world score 65.5 out of 100 for regulatory quality, and you'll hear a bit more about Indonesia specifically. And this signifies that that economies are nearly 2/3 of the way to becoming business ready in this category. Public services across the world score more poorly at close to 50%, and this highlights that this is a particular area where there can be improvement. The Be Ready results in Indonesia align very closely with another report that the World Bank brought out in 2024. In June, we released a report called Unleashing Indonesia's Business Potential, and that had perspectives in from the stakeholders across the private sector, civil society, government agencies, and that report highlights the importance of a strong private sector for long-term growth. It also highlighted a number of regulatory reforms that are needed to create a competitive business environment. And we believe that this environment is important for boosting productivity in manufacturing and services. So against the backdrop of global growth at 2.7%, Indonesia has had a steady growth rate of about 5%, largely driven by robust domestic demand. And that has offset some of the turbulence in external demand. You are blessed with a large population, and that has a moderating effect for you. But as you set your sight on achieving high income status by 2045, it will be necessary to accelerate annual growth to at least 6%. And achieving 6% growth, and I'm aware that the government also has even higher targets than 6% growth, but achieving 6% growth is going to require some reforms to enhance private sector productivity and competitiveness. So as I said, we're very pleased to have our colleague Norman Loaiza, who's the director of our Global Indicators Group here today. He's going to be presenting the findings for Indonesia, and he's going to help us discuss how we can support the development and creativity and energy of Indonesia's private sector. I'm so grateful to have such a distinguished set of speakers today. Sincere gratitude, Pa Rozan, Ibu Mari, Pa Iko, Bu Shinta, Pa Shagal, and Pa Jose for taking the time to join us today. And I really do hope that you will enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you so much for joining us in such large numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Caroline Turk, for your remarks. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, next we will listen to the opening remarks delivered by the Minister of Investment and Downstream Industry. Please welcome His Excellency Rosan Perkasa Ruslani.
Very good morning to you all, and first of all, I would like to express my high appreciation to Worldbank Group and for organizing this event today, and also at the same time launching the Be Ready report in October 2024. And especially I would like to thank Ibu Caroline Turk, Country Director Worldbank Indonesia and Timor-Leste, Norman Loaiza, hopefully I pronounce it right, Norman Loaiza, Director of Global Indicators Group, Worldbank Group, and Ibu Mari Pangestu, yang kita hormati, Vice Chair of the National Economic Council, Ibu Sinta Kamdani, Chairperson of Indonesia Employee Association or APindo, Excellencies, Ambassadors, and also distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Well, definitely we are very pleased with with the report, because it will give us the input, the feedback, in the same time how we can improve our investment climate, we can improve our industry climate, because that, I believe, is our biggest task. Because, Indonesia, we try to keep reforming ourselves in a lot of different sectors, in our policy, in our regulation, because, if I may say, investment is playing a very significant role in our economic growth. Yes, we are still managed to have about 5% of economic growth. This year, hopefully, we can achieve 5.3%, even though the World Bank mentioned 5.1, 5.2. OECD also mentioned about 5.1, 5.2%. And then, under the leadership of Bapak President Prabowo, we would like to have a target of economic growth 8% by 2029. Why investment playing a very significant role? Because if you look at the structure of our economic distribution, mostly 53 to 54% come from our domestic consumption, and then close to 28% come from our investment, government spending about 8 to 9%, and then net exports about 2%. And looking at that structure, definitely investment will play a very significant role in our economic growth. And also at this moment, I I would like also to highlight some of the numbers. Last year in 2024, we still managed to have the investment totally to Indonesia around 114.3 billion US dollar, equivalent about 1,714 trillion rupiah, and is a 103.9% of the target set by the president back in 2024. But the total investment for the next 5 years, actually the number is more than 800 billion US dollar for the next 5 years, from 2025 to 2029. I mean, if you compare it with the past 10 years, that's the jump around 143%. Oh, they have okay, very good. So they also have the number. If you can look at all these goals, the target that we have to achieve from our ministry. So having this report actually give us, the feedback in which sector that we need to be improved, and in the same time, which sector that we still behind compared with our neighboring countries, because we know in the same time we are also competing with our neighboring countries to bring the investment, especially the foreign direct investment, to Indonesia. And again, in the same time, downstream industry will be a significant factor for Indonesia. Last year, counted about close to 27 to 28%. 28.8% the distribution from downstream industry sector. So, and we strongly believe the contribution from downstream industry will improve even up to 30% by the next 5 years. Again, with all this investment, we cannot do it alone. Indonesia, we are aiming to become a high income country by 2045, and we would like all of you to be a part of this remarkable journey. And in the same time, Indonesia also, we are committed to have a net zero emission by 2060 or sooner, actually, with the support by a foreign party. Because we strongly believe that we have to have a sustainable and inclusive growth in Indonesia. We have a huge abundance of natural resource, of renewable energy, close to 3,700 gigawatts of renewable energy, mostly from solar, hydro, geothermal, wind turbine, and currently is only 13.1 gigawatt installed capacity. It's less than 1%. So again, we are going to focus also on pushing the renewable energy to be a major contribution of investment in Indonesia beside our downstream industry. So again, we are very pleased with the report of the World Bank, and also at the same time, we will put a lot of effort to make sure when you have the next report, our score is much higher, and we strongly believe with the support not only from the World Bank but from all of you, we can achieve all the goals of the target set by the government of Indonesia to have 8% economic growth in the future. Thank you very much.
Terima kasih Bapak Menteri, thank you for your exquisite remarks, but we have to ask you to please stay a little bit longer on the stage because we have some token of appreciation from the World Bank, and we would like to invite Ibu Caroline Turk to give the token of appreciation and have photo session with His Excellency. Let's give a big warm of applause, ladies and gentlemen. And please take this opportunity to capture this amazing moment. Thank you very much. You may return to your seat. Ladies and gentlemen, in a few moments, we will listen to the key message from Business Ready 2024, delivered by the Director of Global Indicators Group, Worldbank Group, Mr. Norman Loaiza.
Good day, everyone. It's a real pleasure for me to be here with you today, visiting your beautiful country. And as I see around most gentlemen with very nice shirts, I feel envious of you. I have just a boring shirt. But I'll make sure that before I leave Indonesia, I will actually buy a batik. Thank you, I will. First of all, I want to recognize Minister Rosan for his insightful introduction. And Kerry Turk, the director here at the World Bank, for giving us that global vision, the business environment. And I also want to recognize Mari Pangestu, who is now, of course, a prominent leader in Indonesia. But when we started this project, Business Ready, she was actually in senior leadership at the World Bank, and it was under her guidance that much of this was created. So, thank you. All right, so I come here to present the first report, the inaugural report of a new corporate flagship of the World Bank called Business Ready, which replaces and improves upon doing business, which I am sure you remember. Doing business was incredibly influential, so we want to at least get to that level of influence, but with a more robust set of indicators. Let me tell you something that I believe you will all agree with, that no country has been able to develop without sustained economic growth. With economic growth comes transformation and also opportunities. Opportunities for innovation, for investment, and maybe most importantly, for job creation. The need for growth is large. You may have read, some of you, the World Development Report, the latest one. It's about the middle income trap, or this trap that many countries around the world face in going from just being in the middle to an advanced level of the economy. And they have this magical number that they present as the goal that all economies must have in order to overcome the middle income trap. And that's 5%. Now, 5% is in the annual per capita GDP growth. that is required to escape the middle income trap. Now, what that implies about 6 to 7% of overall GDP growth. Indonesia has been growing at a rate in the last 10 years in per capita terms of about 3.4%. So there is a gap between what Indonesia has been able to achieve and what's needed in order for this transition to high-income economy to happen. Now, I understand that there are high goals for increasing growth in the country, and actually, this ambition is remarkable. And I hope that this project can actually tell you how to approach it, how to do it. And for this, it is key to have a private sector that is very vibrant, that is very dynamic. To be frank, the private sector is already an economic giant around the world, and certainly in Indonesia. It employs about 90% of people. It produces and invests about 3/4 of the total, and it contributes massively to government revenue, 80%. But very often, this private sector is not very active. It's stagnant in many economies. And actually, it becomes something like a sleepy giant. The question is how we can revive, how we can wake up that sleepy giant. The answer to that question is we need to create a business environment that is favorable. Now, this shows an economy where the business environment is not favorable. There are barriers, there are constraints, there are not enablers there. So the economy in this case becomes sort of primitive, rudimentary, isolated. But when the business environment improves in the sense of decreasing these barriers and also putting in place enablers in the sense of public sector services, then you have a different economy. You have one that is sophisticated, one that is dynamic, than one that is a lot more vibrant. That, of course, begs the question of what makes for an enabling business environment. That is the question that we try to address in this new report, Business Ready. As Carrie said, we actually call it also Be Ready. Be Ready is not only a short form, but it's also a call for action by governments and by entrepreneurs. We released in October of 2024 the first inaugural edition of this report, and importantly, it included Indonesia. In 2025, we will have about, well, the first report included 50 economies exactly. The second report will be released at the end of September of this year, will include more than 100 economies. And importantly, will include two giants, the US and China. The third report is going to include about 180 economies. And it will also include certain giants, like, for instance, Brazil and India. So by 2026, we will have completed this coverage of most economies around the world. And from that moment onwards, we will have an annual edition that will include about 180 economies every year. So that's the goal. We are indeed in the rollout phase of this project. Let me now tell you a bit about the structure. You may be wondering what is it about? And first, I'll tell you about the topics that we include. We include all the topics that are related to the life cycle of the firm. That's the way that we have structured the report. We start with business entry, of course, at the very beginning when the firm starts operations, then business location, about getting the right site for your business, utility services, water, electricity, internet, basic services that are needed, labor, of course, no business runs without workers, financial services, credits and for payments, international trade, which for a country, an open economy like Indonesia, critical in the management of customs and also trade infrastructure, taxation, of course, the efficiency of the tax administration, but also the moderation of the tax burden, dispute resolution. Whether we want it or not, there are always commercial disputes, and we want to see how easy they can be addressed by courts and by other ways of resolving disputes. Market competition, critical in this world. It includes also competition for government contracts, for procurement, and includes also innovation by new firms. And finally, business insolvency, which is about the ease of liquidating a business or actually reorganizing a company. As you can see here, this is the life cycle of a firm. And this is more than just a list of topics, but it's actually the way that we conceptualize how businesses should behave. That is, there is a life cycle of a firm being something like a living entity that has a period of birth, some growth, and possibly also some exiting of the market. So productive firms should remain and grow. Low productivity firms should actually exit the firm and release resources. Now, for each of these 10 topics, we have measurement of 3 pillars. These pillars are the regulatory framework, public services, and operational efficiency. Let me first define what I mean, although some of these definitions are kind of self-evident. The regulatory framework is about all the rules and regulations and laws that a firm must comply with as it goes through its life cycle. Public services is about the facilities that governments provide to help businesses comply with the regulatory framework, but also the institutions and the infrastructure that enable business activities. And operational efficiency is a way of measuring the ease of compliance with regulations and the effectiveness of public services. So, if you will, this is like the regulatory framework going to operational efficiency is going like de jure to de facto, or what is on the books to what happens in practice. All of this equally important, and all of this interrelated. Let me give you just one example. Actually, one example just taken from the topic of business location. In order for you to have this more concrete idea of what we mean by each of these pillars. So, for instance, under regulatory framework, we will be measuring the restrictions on the ability of foreign companies to lease or own property. This is just one indicator, an example. Okay? Public services, we see whether there are digital platforms to register a property transfer. And on operational efficiency, we take a look at the time to obtain a construction permit. Okay, having told you this, let me also actually tell you about the data sources. You may be wondering, well, how do you collect all this information? And we have 2 data sources. One is what we call expert questionnaires. So we ask about 60 to 80 experts per economy about the different aspects of the regulatory framework and public services, sometimes operational efficiency too. But we also, and this is one important difference with respect to doing business, is that we include information that comes directly from firms. through enterprise surveys. We conducted an enterprise survey in Indonesia with a large and nationally representative sample of firms. And we have used that information mostly to have data that come from firm on the pillar on efficiency, the de facto measurement. How are we going to refresh this data? Well, for expert questionnaires, we will actually refresh the data every year. And for enterprise surveys, we will do it on a 3-year cycle. Now, you may be wondering, why don't you do enterprise surveys every year? The reason is very simple. It is too expensive to do it, and it takes an enormous amount of resources. So we do it in this way to optimize the resources that we have. Now, let's go to the results. But before I actually tell you about the results for Indonesia, I have to underscore the vastness, the richness of the indicators that we are providing. So we have 1,200 indicators for each economy. So what this actually does is providing a compass and a guide for economic reform that is very detailed and specific. So we don't tell you only where you want to get, but also how to actually get to that place as if we were climbing a mountain. Of course, it will be impossible to produce or to present 1,200 indicators for 50 economies, even more for 100 or for 180. So we need to summarize these results, and the way we do it is by using scores. So we have scores for every pillar that I told you, and for each of the 10 topics. So this will give you a good sense of how the economy actually is performing in each of these areas. Now, it's only natural to ask in the first assessment which countries perform well. If you are curious, let me tell you that we notice that actually the richer economies tend to do better. Now, that's not surprising. We knew that. And actually, the examples that we have in these 50 economies are Estonia and Singapore that perform actually quite well. Estonia, mainly because it has an incredibly effective public services that has digitalized almost everything to respond to the needs of people and firms. Singapore, of course, is very well known also for for the efficiency of government, but also for its pragmatism. Maybe what is more surprising, though, is that countries do not need to be rich to develop a favorable business environment. And we have actually seen it in the first report. And let me give you a few examples. The first is in sub-Saharan Africa, the example of Rwanda. Rwanda has improved its business environment quite a lot in the last decade or so, even for a longer time. Now, the result is that it performs in the top 20% in 6 out of the 10 topics. Rwanda has actually grown in per capita terms at a rate of 5%. It has doubled the size of its economy in the last 10 years. It's multiplied by 2 in the last 10 years. And also, the size of foreign direct investment has been multiplied by 2. The second example is Georgia. And let me tell you, this is actually not something that happens overnight. This is something that is achieved over many, many years of reform. And they also have been growing in the last decade by about 5% in per capita terms. And Georgia performs, in our assessment, in the top 20% in 7 out of the 10 topics. In South America, the region where I am from, incidentally, I am from Peru, the country that performs the best till now is Colombia. Colombia actually does quite well in the first and second pillar, in regulatory framework and the design of public services. However, it doesn't do so well in a pillar 3, or on operational efficiency. Maybe that's something that we Latin Americans are always about. We can do good laws, but when it comes to implementing them, that's where we have issues. And actually, it's not just Colombia. It's all of Latin Americans that we have been able to assess, including my own country. And on the other side of the spectrum, if you will, is Vietnam. Vietnam actually doesn't do very well in terms of norms and the design of public services, but they are very efficient. So Vietnam actually comes in the top 20% in terms of operational efficiency. What we notice is something that Carrie Turk, of course, referred to in the introductory remarks, that in the world there is something called a public services gap, which means that the scores for the regulatory framework tend to be higher than the scores for the design of public services. Maybe that shouldn't be surprising because it's a lot harder to put together a good public service than actually to just pass a law or enact a regulation. And actually, in low-income economies, this gap is 3 times as high as the gap in high-income economies. Let's see what happens now in the case of Indonesia in the international context. Okay, so these are the results on the 3 pillars for Indonesia. What is most remarkable to me is how even they are. I have been presenting this in many different countries, and this is not the picture that we see in different countries. We see some variability. And usually what we see is that in Pillar 2 is a lot lower than Pillar 1. But that doesn't happen. In the case of Indonesia, we could even have had just 1 score. And this is about 60%. Now, I can ask you, is 60% good enough? Well, maybe the answer is depends. Depends. If you want to keep growing at the rate, moderate rate, and maybe have the possibility of advancing to high-income economy several decades from now, that's fine. But if you really need to accelerate growth, then this 60% must be improved. Singapore has a better performance in a regulatory framework of public services, but the difference really comes in terms of operational efficiency. And this is the best in the first 50 economies that we have assessed the first year. Singapore happens to be at the top on operational efficiency, so that's why the 2 are the same. There are other countries that do better in terms of regulatory framework and public services. Now, I also told you that we have scores for each of the 10 topics. So this is what we see from business entry all the way to business insolvency. Again, what is remarkable to me is that although there are small differences in the scores from topic to topic, actually they all are all around 60. So again, it's a 60% mark. These scores can be understood, they go from 0 to 100, as the percentage of business readiness. So if you ask me just one question, how business ready is Indonesia, I would say 60%. That would be my number. Singapore, here, performing better, with one exception. That exception is labor, and this is the best in business ready. Okay, this is all about scores. And I think they give you a picture of where Indonesia starts. But I will also give you some examples of the indicators. I told you that we collect 1,200 indicators per economy, right? Well, I won't show you all that much. I will just choose 1 indicator per topic. We have 10 topics, so I'll do this fast. On business entry. In the country, Indonesia, it takes 65 days to register a new foreign company. In the most efficient economies, it takes 3 days. So more than 2 months here. Business location, It takes companies almost 3 months to transfer a property. In the most efficient economy, it takes 1 day. Utility services, in Indonesia, when there is an outage and that is planned, these are not communicated to customers or made publicly available, which is best practice. Labor, only 8% of firms offer formal training to their permanent full-time employees, only 8%. In the best performing economies, this is more than 66%. Now, why the difference? I have one suspicion. It has to do with the level of informality in Indonesia, which is massive. So formal firms are reluctant to train these employees, even if they are regarded as full-time employees. Financial services is an area that really must be improved. One example, only 34% of payments by firms to their suppliers are made electronically. Only 34%. So I suppose firms are using lots of checks or cash. In the best performing economies, it is more than 99%. And this is information that we are getting directly from firms in this representative sample. International trade, this is where we see big losses happening. It costs 66% of an imported goods value and 35% of an exported goods value to comply with import-export requirements. In the most efficient economy, it costs around 2%. So there's a big loss here in importing and exporting. So sometimes here nowadays, people talk about tariffs a lot, right? Tariffs is what everyone is talking about. But just imagine here, tariffs may be a loss of 25% at most, but here the loss is in the order of from 35 to 66%. Taxation, less than 40% of Indonesian firms file and pay their taxes electronically. In the most efficient economies, it is 100%. Dispute resolution. A firm must wait 150 days, 5 months, on average, for final judgment to be enforced, that a commercial dispute has been resolved. In the most efficient economies, that enforcement takes just 1 week. On market competition, prices, 44% of firms are telling us that their prices are somehow regulated. In the most efficient economies, more competitive economies, it is less than 4%. And finally, on business insolvency, the cost to resolve an in-court liquidation proceeding is 15% of the company valuation. 15% lost. In the most efficient economies, it costs 2%. In conclusion, the conclusion of Business Ready for Indonesia, there is great need for economic growth and job creation. We can see the ambition of the government and most people to grow, but in order for that to happen, Indonesia must improve in all areas to become business ready. In all areas, because in all areas it gets around this 60% of business readiness. Let's go back to growth a bit, to go back to the beginning, if you will, at the very end of this presentation. Indonesia is the growth for ASEAN economies, and in particular for Indonesia, presented here in this graph. Indonesia from 1990 to 2023 has grown at a rate of 3.2%. It's very similar to the growth of other economies, but much lower than Vietnam, for instance. So this actually is not a bad picture where you actually see that these economies are growing with some bumps, like the pandemic or the financial crisis especially the financial crisis in East Asia, the late 1990s. But if we look actually the growth relative to, or the GDP per capita relative to Singapore, there is where we see some stagnation. So the country has been hovering around 10% of GDP per capita with respect to Singapore. The only country in ASEAN that actually has done things differently in the sense of actually gaining ground, although coming from a very low level, is Vietnam, which actually has gone from less than 6 to over 10% of GDP per capita of Singapore. So the goal really is to accelerate this convergence to the high-income economies and to have enough growth to surpass this middle-income track. Many countries are stuck in this middle-income trap. They need at least 5% of GDP per capita growth for sustained periods of time. The way to escape this middle-income trap is by having the private sector more dynamic and also more resilient through a better business environment. The key messages then of our report is that it is vital, first of all, that Indonesia renews its commitment to economic growth. So this ambition that the government has presented on improving growth, that's great. That's the first step. You renew your ambition for economic growth. But then you need to have a map. You need to have a way to actually obtain that ambition. And that is by having the private sector be this engine of high and sustained growth. That does not mean, however, that the government just should take its hands off the economy. Not at all. That's not what we are saying. Actually, the government can do a lot to support the right business environment for the economy. What does that mean? Enacting high-quality regulations, designing good public services, and then ensuring that these regulations and these public services are actually put into practice and not just left on paper. We hope that actually this data set, along with all the projects that the World Bank produces, will help guide this process of reform, and that Indonesia will actually learn through facts and not through accidents. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Norman, for the remarkable presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, for those who wants to ask regarding to the presentation that we just heard together, please, you can drop the questions to Slido by scanning the QR code on your table or on the LED screen. And please do not forget to mention your name, your institution, and to whom the question is addressed about the presentation or later on regarding the panel discussion that we will about to have in a few moments. Ladies and gentlemen, before we move on to our next agenda, we will join our next agenda, or due to his agenda that very, very packed today, maybe he has to leave this event. Baik, terima kasih. Thank you for your time, Bapak Menteri. Please give a big round of applause. Have a great day ahead, Bapak Menteri. Once again, thank you for your time attending this event. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, before I introduce the moderator and the panelists for the next panel discussion, I would like to remind you once again that this session will be conducted in English. For those who joining us online, please just press the globe icon below to listen to the session in Bahasa Indonesia. And of course, for you who is here right now, you can pick up the translation devices at the registration desk. Thank you. And distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, for today's panel discussion session, we will be guided by Ibu Mari Pangestu, Vice Chairperson of the National Economic Council, who will moderate the topic, how can Indonesia reform for a stronger business environment that supports the private sector? Let me please read your short bio, Ibu. Ibu Pangestu was the Worldbank Managing Director of Development Policy and Partnerships from 2020 to 2023. Prior to joining the bank, Mari Pangestu served as Indonesia's Minister of Trade from 2004 to 2011 and as Minister of Tourism and Creative Economy from 2011 to 2014. And our panelists for today's panel discussion, Bapak Iksan Zulkarnain, Assistant Deputy for Investment and Downstream Acceleration, Coordinating Ministry for the Economic Affairs. Ibu Sinta Kamdani, Chairperson, Indonesia Employers Association. Bapak Yose Rizal Damuri, Executive Director, Center for Strategic and International Studies. Bapak Chaikal Nuryakin, Director, Institute for Economics and Social Research, University of Indonesia. Without further ado, please welcome our moderator and panelists. Ibu Sinta is joining us as she is still outside with Bapak Menteri. And Ibu Mari, the stage is yours.
Kayaknya nggak jalan. Oh yeah, okay. Has to be switched on. Good morning, everyone. I think we've just had a very maybe a slightly sobering presentation from Norman, but I think it was a good message, and it couldn't come at a better time when Indonesia is really discussing and wanting to go on the first, I think your first conclusion. We are committed to a higher growth path, and you could see that from Pak Rosan's presentation. For us to go from 5.3% to 8% in the next 5 years, we actually have to double our investment from 1.9 trillion to 3.4 trillion. So we do have homework ahead. How to really double the investment must mean we have to really improve the role of the private sector as well as improve the investment climate. So I think that, and all that is what is important is the job creation that goes with it. So I think everybody recognizes our challenge and our homework, and I think today's presentation helps us to focus, hopefully, on our homework. And there's another, besides our growth story, there is, at the moment, as we all know, the world is navigating a lot of turbulence out there, the geopolitics, And navigating that is actually a challenge, but also opportunity, because we all know there's a reshaping of the regional value chain, there's relocation of investments occurring. So how do we, as Indonesia, be able to capture the opportunity that is offered by this reshaping of the global situation as well? So I'm today joined by 4 distinguished experts who will help us answer the question of how can Indonesia be 100% business ready, not just almost 2/3 business ready. First, I'd like to welcome Iksan Zulkarnain, Assistant Deputy for Assistant Deputy for Investment and Downstream Acceleration from the Coordinating Ministry for the Economic Affairs. Next we have, well, Ibu Shinta will be joining us shortly. Maybe I'll wait till she comes before I introduce her, but joining us on her right is Jose Rizal Damhuri, Executive Director of the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And also we welcome Haikal Nuryakin, who is the Director of the Institute for Economics and Social Research, or LPAM, at the University of Indonesia. Well, I guess I'll have to introduce Shinta in her absence. She is, as we all know, the dynamic chairwoman, the first woman to be heading the Indonesian Employers Association, or APindo, which actually represent large, medium, and small business owners. And APindo also does their own survey every 5 years of business climate. I think we have heard enough of the presentation today about the Business Ready report, which was launched last year. And as Norman pointed out, I was there at the inception, if that's the right word for it, the birth of this report. So I'm very excited to be here today to see the results and to see how it can actually help government and non-government. I think in the past, doing business was mainly focused on government, what governments need to do to improve the business climate. But actually, this report also talks about what businesses and non-businesses can do to improve the business climate. So I think we heard already some of the comparisons. Some of them were very stark, including the number of days to open business. Pak Rosan immediately reacted in my table, actually. He quickly asked his deputy, oh, how come it's, was it 95 days, was it? I forgot. 95 days, 65 days. And he said, oh, why is it? So he's already given the deputy a homework. You need to at least half it. So I think this is we are getting the right business reaction. So maybe it's good I start with Pak Iksan. The Be Ready report points out that there are both bright spots and areas for improvements in terms of Indonesia's business regulations and public services. So the first 2 pillars offered to firms. What are the government's key priorities to sustain and improve these areas, with the purpose, obviously, to accelerate private sector growth through a better business environment? And if you can actually highlight some of the concrete things that the government plans to do, that would be really helpful, I think, for our audience. Over to you, Pak Zulkarnain.
Thank you, Prof. Mari. So, good morning, everyone. So, let me introduce first my name, Iksan Zulkarnain, but for short, you can call me Iko. So that's the, for short, Prof. Mari. This is a very interesting question. And also thank you, Pak Norman, showed us the result for the Be Ready 2024, especially for Indonesia. We know that as Pak Norman already showed us, there are some bright spots and also some areas that we need to improve. To mention or to answer what Professor Mari asked us. So the concrete plans that we are going to do, Prof. Mari, is we would like to reduce the registration process that are needed for the foreign companies in Indonesia to work. So as we know that we are now in the process of reviewing our regulations, one of the regulations as implementing regulations from the Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja. So we know it as a government regulation number 5, 2021. So mainly we are trying to reduce the number of days that are needed for the foreign companies to register in Indonesia, as you mentioned, Prof. Mari. So it is mentioned that we need, or they need like 65 days to register. We hope that we can reduce it less than 10 days because we are trying to reduce the days of getting the basic requirements. So we know previously the basic requirements is one of the burdensome in regulation, especially for the foreign companies to register in Indonesia, to start business in Indonesia, because we don't know actually how many days or how many steps that we need. Right now, after reviewing and revising the government regulations, we are now more sure that the days that we are taken to register in registering the foreign company is less than 10 days, Ibu. Hopefully that it is workable in this year. Also, some of the regulations that are right now in the process of review is the presidential regulations, Ibu, especially in the foreign participations in some sectors. So we hope that it is going to increase the business climate and also, yeah. Yes, correct, Ibu. It's a negative list as it is known previously. Right now we know it as a priority list. So hopefully this year we have 2 main regulations that can increase the business climate, and it's going to be more favorable for the business actors, Ibu. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, 10 days. That was actually a great target. And I hope that the improvement or the revision of the Daftar Negatif Investasi or negative list for investment, that you will also involve stakeholders in the discussion for the revisions. Shinta, you are the head of the APindo, or Indonesian Employers Association. And APindo, as we know, also does its own survey of business perceptions every 5 years. So from the perspective of business, what, from your perspective, is the most urgent regulatory or policy reforms that are needed to really make us be ready for investment and for the private sector? And if I may just add one more question, because one of Norman's slides talks about, because the whole be ready is not just about what governments need to do, but also what businesses can also do. I think he had a very striking number about on the labor, that Indonesian firms, only 8% of Indonesian firms have formal training compared to the best practice of 66%. So just wondering, I know APindo, this is one of APindo's also priorities, so if you can also comment on that. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ibu Mari, and thank you, World Bank, for this opportunity and sharing our insights. I think this is good news to have this. I always call, before, I remember when you had the ease of doing business, everybody's anticipating when is this going to come out, whether Indonesia is going to pick up on the list. So I think having this survey, I think is very good, the Be Ready survey, so that it's really giving an independent view related more to the region. So this is very much aligned to what APindo is trying to do with the economic roadmap survey that we do every 5 years. And actually, it's more for inputs to the government. So government can really have a view on what's happening on the ground. So yes, the result is very much aligned. But what's good is, I think the World Bank do this comparison with other neighboring countries, Bumari, which of course our report focusing on Indonesian players. So So I think it's good to see the positioning of where we are. And sometimes coming to work from World Bank, Carol, it makes a big difference than coming from business, because we are always said, oh, businesses complain all the time, you know. But I think as an independent World Bank giving these studies, a very professional study to survey to the government, I think really helps to open up door. So I would like to share a few things. Ibu Mari asked about the highlighting some areas that's aligned to the Be Ready survey. So first, on this is a lot of the things that I said. I think I mentioned. Of course, they're not new. There many are still there, and we have to mention because it's still issues. But first is obviously the regulatory certainty. So regulatory certainty and predictability of the business and investment climate. I think this is number one. And what we see is there's been tremendous progress, obviously, having the structural reforms through the omnibus. We know there's a lot of over-regulated, over-licensing, and so forth, and this helps, you know, with the omnibus. But again, the issues lies in the implementation. I think when we talk about the certainty and the consistency, this is where it lies. There's still a big lack of a gap between what's, you know, the intention or coming from the government and the implementation. And we see also a lot of changes, and also related to a lot maybe of the communication. I think a lot of times the communication and consultation aspect, I cannot say this is the same for all across, but I think most of it, we still have issues with the communication and the consultation aspect as well. So the survey reveals that only 13.8% of business believe that government governance is being carried out with transparency and accountability. So I think this clearly thing, you know, on the communication and consultation aspect. And I think there are two cases that offer also important lessons. And I think Ibu Mari mentioned about the manpower recently. I think this is something that was a big, of course, hit in terms of, you know, how the announcement on the minimum wage and things like that are not done with proper consultations and so forth. And we fully understand where the government is coming from, but I think there needs to be a better way of consultation and communication. While this actually formula of minimum wage has already been agreed in the omnibus and the implementing regulations. So this is just an example of what has happened that, you know, recently. And also if we see on the OSS, I think, you know, government has made a big leap by wanting to digitalize, having the one single submission OSS. I think it's very, very good. But again, implementation. So we are now looking into how OSS can be improved as a system that can really work within what the government originally wants to do. So this is also something that we need to pay attention. The second is, I would say, the coherence between the trade, investment, and industrial policies. I think we can't look at this policy on a standalone. They're all interrelated, you know. And this is why when we look at policy, cannot be separated because they are deeply interconnected. Business will only engage in trade if the domestic industry hold a comparative advantage. And imports will naturally increase when local industry lack competitiveness against foreign goods. So this is all, again, the readiness of also our market. So sometimes the policy has to be related to what's happening domestically. So between the all this policy, there needs to be what we call alignment, right? And it's one way or the other, it's all interconnected. And I always said to the Ministry of Investment, because they're trying to really now make a big leap of opening up doors, we have to see how some of the other policy will impact having the investment policy. So I think we need to understand that we need to drive more alignment on those three. And business actor also note that in the international trade policy are sometimes not really well coordinated. In the survey says that 80% of business actor reported never been involved in real consultation, and 58% indicate that trade policy were not adequately discussed with businesses. So again, actually this is a wake-up call for us also on the industry organization, business association, because this is part of our role, you know, how we can engage more actors in having and involving them in before many of these trade policies are issued. So those who are also involved felt the consultation process fell short in terms of consistency, efficiency, and regulatory impact investment. So the two things that we always said to the government, please do the regulatory impact assessment. That's really, really key. And second, public-private consultation. Those are the two that we have requested. And I'm happy to share that the Ministry of Investment has happy to open up this, and they're going to start with this as well. So I hope many of the ministries will do the same. I think it's not that they're not doing consultation, they do, but sometimes they're just doing consult for the formality of it. And I think as many of us know, to do the right public-private consultation, you need a proper system of how you actually do it. So those two aspects, RIA and public-private consultation, I think we think are keys. And furthermore, 81% of businesses involved in import stated that less than 50% of their imported supply could be substituted by imported alternatives. So clearly, it's mentioned that even though the government is really trying to do the substitution of import, it's still really not fully there. So the policy needs to support on what's ready and what's not ready. And we also feel that 43% of companies believe that current trade policy do not support production on or sales performance. So this is all in line. And I think there's also, we did a survey on, for example, on local content, KDN. This is something that is clearly has be highlighted, and many businesses are very concerned, not just local, but also foreign businesses. And this is very much related to investment. So they have a lot of concern on the local content requirements, and of course, Indonesia readiness is very important. So in one way, we have to appreciate the government initiative of starting to develop this local content. But I think the roadmap needs to be clear, and I think the readiness of the industries needs to be there. So those are the two areas. And lastly, I just want to mention that optimizing our international trade policy to strengthen our global competitiveness is also one area that was shared also a lot in the survey. You know, how to boost export and investment through the shifting of global value chain, how Indonesia can be part of the global value chain. And I think we've seen that many of the alignings of the findings from Apindo, 53% of the business actors stated that expanding access to affordable trade financing is also an important part. So I think utilizing free trade agreements, for example, I think are still low in terms of numbers. Many are not doesn't even understand what it is and so forth. So I think some of these issues, Ibu Mari, are very much aligned on and why it's also related to some of the issues that are in the
Be
ready
Yeah. Okay.
survey.
Thanks a lot. I think what you've been mentioning, a lot of it has to do with operational efficiency, the third pillar. And if I remember your nice graph, we are 60%, but best practice is like 80%. You know, compared to regulatory, we are kind of closer to the best practice. So it is really about implementation and, you know, on the ground. So let me now turn to Jose. Chaikal. Chaikal first. Yeah, I guess they put down the wrong sitting order here. On my notes, it says you first. I'd like you to, I'd like to get your take on the business-ready methodology. The report combines information coming from experts. You know, the doing business was really just focusing on the experts who are familiar with the business environment, with data coming from firms. Now they're combining the de jure with the de facto coming from firms. The firm level survey is the new part of the business ready compared to the doing business. So as a researcher looking closely at private sector development, what's your take on the report's methodology?
Okay, thank you for having me, Prof. Mary. For me, as an economist and as a researcher, actually I miss an indicators, right? We know that the ease of doing business already stopped in, I think, in 2020. And the World Bank, I think, already like trying to have, taking back the confidence, the public trust of the data, right? And I think the methodology of this new business survey with the completely new indicators, like 1,200,000 indicators, is very much, for me, is very much huge, and somehow it's also complementing the World Bank Enterprise Survey with the qualitative judgment of the experts. So there is a qualitative and quantitative surveys on this. Of course, this is a very much a very progress methodology, right? Because we don't deal as solely depend on the quantitative data, right? For the researchers, we need to always complement quantitative data with the qualitative data, right? Although I understand in Indonesia, Worldbank tried to have like a very representative this data for each country, and in the same time, Worldbank tried to also have to comparative between countries, right? That's the difficult one, right? Because for the quantitative data, I think it's already very standard, right? The survey of firms. But for the qualitative one, for the expert judgment that you have, I don't know, there is like a very standard which experts available in the country, right? For all, I think it's 21 questionnaires and 3 to 5 experts on each questionnaires. How you standardize these experts? Honestly, I haven't read in very detail the methodology, but I do believe because now Worldbank already like very open, transparent. You involve many stakeholders, also the external judgment. So I think the most important thing for the validity, for the for the evidence base procedures already there, right? So I could not argue about the results, right? We never ever, as a researchers and as a lecturer, we cannot argue about the results, bro. What we can argue is about the methodology, right? But I think with the more transparent, publicly available data, Worldbank has done a very good progress on that. I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jackal. I think you remind me of all the discussions we were having at the bank when we were incepting this. And certainly the experts pillar of doing the survey is still maintained, right? So I mean, a question, this is more a question to Norman. Can you actually then do extrapolation backwards to connect to the old series? That's just a question. And second, I think you put forth a very important point. We now have a very rich firm level survey that is done by the World Bank. It's the only, by the way, as far as I know, the only firm level surveys that can be done comparatively between countries. So actually for researchers, this is going to be hopefully a very good tool.
Maybe one thing, Bu, in Indonesia, because even the World Bank unleashing business potentials last year report already said that Indonesia has like a very missing large enterprises.
Yes, that's right.
Because you know that Indonesia's the large enterprises mostly state-owned enterprise.
Yeah.
They mostly operate in the mining sectors or financial sectors. So it seems that, I don't know, the expert survey and also the World Bank enterprise survey, whether this representative enough to this state-owned enterprise in Indonesia, right? Because they are huge, and it seems they are also, because they know that the market competition is the most important one there. Whether they are blocking competition and everything, it depends on the state-owned enterprises. So whether this is also already been representative in the firm survey and also in the expert judgment survey for the state-owned enterprises.
Okay, thank you, Chaikao. Jose, the Be Ready report intends to guide policy reforms that can transform the country's business environment. But reforms are easier said than done, as we say. The devil is in the details and the actual implementation. And I'm sure we've all been through this a few times. So what is your take on how can we do better on implementation?
Yes, thank you, Bumari. I think you know more about it than anybody in this room, because you already tried to promote reforms in Indonesia. I think since early 1990s, perhaps, you've been involved in the reform process. But yes, I think, first of all, let me congratulate Norman and the team, as well as World Bank, for very anticipated this Be Ready indicators. We all look forward to have more implementation based on these Be Ready indicators, and then you're going to also expand the coverage, and it would also create a greater, I think, a greater motivation for us in Indonesia here to do the reforms. But as Bu Mari mentions, reforms much more easy to say than done, because it has difficulties at all levels. At technocratic level, for example, the difficulties is on to identify what areas that we need to reforms. We also need to define the goals and how to approach these kind of reforms. That's at the technocratic level, the design level. At the implementation level, for sure, there should be more consistencies when dealing with the reforms between the plan and implementation, for example, and or it should also be consistent over the time. The reforms cannot be done only in 1 year, but it has to be done perhaps even for several administrations. Then it needs to be consistent during that time. And last things, I should also mention about the political economy of reforms, that often we don't really pay enough attention. When we're dealing with reforms, there would be winner and loser. We have to admit it, and we have to deal with that. Especially, we have to deal with the resistance from the losers, from the losing part of the economy, and perhaps also come up with something to compensate them. We also need to admit that the cost the cost of reforms often take place immediately, while the benefits of reforms actually can occur only after several years. So you have to maintain again the consistency and the motivations. So in order to be successful, reforms need to be a national agenda, supported by all stakeholders at national and at local levels, and also equipped by appropriate mechanisms like Bu Sinta also mentions, RIA, for example, or consultations between private and private sectors and government. That should be done appropriately. So in my opinion, Be Ready can provide useful framework to especially to look at what kind of area that Indonesia need to do reforms, and what kind of area that would give us a more multiplier effect to start with. It also can provide us some kind of an instrument to raise awareness and political support together political support for reforms by giving a better understanding to the current situations. I think that's my take on your question, Puma.
Thank you. Yeah. So I think from all the panelists, I think we heard that. I think I'm like Chaikal. I do miss the leading indicators, but now it seems some of that is back, or a lot of, and it's richer. It's a richer set of indicators, actually. So hopefully this will be a good guidance as to identifying which areas the government should prioritize. I mean, just to share with you, doing business was actually very useful as a leading indicator when we were in government back in 2004 to 2014 to guide the reforms and to measure, whether you actually have succeeded in doing the reform. So I'm hoping this will also be a good guidance. But I think what Jose and Shinta mentioned, how do you make sure that implementation, how do you have the consultation and the communication? Because transparency was a very important message coming out from Norman just then, because you want to be able to undertake the policies or changes or implement them in a way that is actually meant to help your stakeholders, right? So I think this is a message for the government. But Iko, you are here as the government, so I hope you heard that. And I think it has to come from both ways, right? So the indicators, the leading indicators, help the government to make the commitment. And then how to do it, it needs really a very collaborative process. And so let me just close with a question for all of you, and you have about 1 minute perhaps to answer it. If you had to pick from all the Be Ready report's findings, pick one that you think will have the most impact. You can actually go through Norman's list of 10 as a start, or if you have read the report, some of the others. Because they actually, when he had the 10 things listed, a lot of that can be done very easily without no government budget. It's what I call a costless stimulus to the private sector. So, but Iko, you can start. Which one would you pick as the priority for government to have the most impact? If you could just pick one of the Be Ready findings.
Yes, thank you so much, Prof. So yeah, I agree, Prof, because the 10 topics are very important topics. But if I have to choose one of them, it would be the first one, Prof. It's a business entry. I think it's a very important one.
Okay, thank you. And you had given yourself a target. The government has a target now of 10 days. Yeah. Okay. All right. Everybody in the room have heard that. Okay, Shinta.
Business entry to me is also the most important if I have to pick one. But I think we also need to mention another weak area is financial services. And I think not many are focusing so much on this, but I think this is also equally important, because when we look at investment, I mean, this related to investment, this is also still one of the Indonesia weakest area. So I think these two, I would say, are key. But yes, business entry is the most important.
Okay, Jose.
Yeah, I think business entry is also one of the most important. But if we look at the Be Ready indicator, Indonesia is actually already above the ASEAN average in this
on the regulatory
yeah,
side.
in this indicator, business entry.
Business entry, yeah.
In the business entry, we already above the average, our score. So, but we do have some topics that we are below ASEAN's average, including also in one that is quite important for you, Bu Mari, in the past on international trade. Yeah. So we know also how the import and export in the procedures in Indonesia are still quite cumbersome and then quite costly for the business sectors in order to operate here more efficiently in Indonesia.
Chaikal?
Yeah, because I'm a microeconomist, maybe it's biased. So I would like to say it's like, I don't know, this is the business growth indicator, not entry, but how the business could grow from medium to large. Because I think the business entry for Indonesia is already good. And I think the most important one is market competitions, right? This is the very lowest one for Indonesia, especially for the, once again, state-owned enterprise existing in Indonesia. And the conglomerates, I don't know why the conglomerates, in Indonesia, we cannot realize on conglomerates like a chaebol in Korea. Conglomerates just invest in food and beverage or property. They are just less risk takers. I don't know. I don't know whether there is like regulatory rents towards state-owned enterprise, but the private ones, the larger one, non-state-owned enterprise, seems confront on face regulatory uncertainties more rather than the state-owned enterprise. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, you all were so efficient. We still have almost 2 minutes left. So let me go back to Pak Iko because I wanted, a number of the panelists said a lot on the business collaboration with the government. So can you give your perspective? How do you think we should be improving transparency and improving the collaboration with private sector and non-government to make sure we can be 100% be ready?
Yes, thank you, Prof. It's a very, I think it's a very crucial, as also Ibu Sinta mentioned previously. It's about collaborations among the stakeholders, Prof. Not only the government to the business actors, but also with the experts. So one thing that we have right now, and we prepare right now, Prof, is the action plan on how we reach 100% be ready. And we try to get involved not only the government sectors, but also the private, Prof. So we define the goals, and when we hope that the private sectors also know where we are going, so then it can create commitment together, and we can work together. So I hope that is going to be one of the ways that we can increase collaboration amongst the stakeholders, Prof.
So you actually broke down already the different parts of the Be Ready report and have an action plan? Wow.
Yes, Prof. So we work together with
really great to hear.
Ministry of Investment. We work together, and almost it's been like through 2-3 months.
Okay.
So hopefully we can finish all the action plans in the near future and shortly.
But you should collaborate, obviously, and communicate with the business and non-business sector.
For sure. Thank you.
If I may,
yes.
it has to be the agenda, to become the agenda of at the national level, not only at the Ministry of Investment, but also involving others. So this is a good time actually for us to collaborate at the national levels as well as at the local levels.
And I think we always mentioned it, and Pak Prabowo recently mentioned this about Indonesia Incorporated.
Yeah.
And I think definitely if
That's
we want
an
to
old
achieve
term, but
Indonesia
we need to do it,
Incorporated, it's definitely the collaboration that we need to establish. And I know, I just want to close this, that I think it's important, yes, we know a lot of issues, but we have to find solutions, right?
Yes.
And please listen to us as well, because I think businesses will be also able to give some recommendations
and be part of the solution.
Yeah, I think this is an important element, and I think to have a fair and competitive level playing field, include also the state-owned enterprise. So between, I think, private sector and the own enterprise as businesses needs to also be part of this. So I think, government, I think this is a new paradigm that it's not only a jargon of Indonesia Incorporated, but, how we can actually do it together. Thank you.
Yes. Jackal, you can have a last word since everybody had a last word. Yeah, any last word? Very briefly. If you have, if you don't, it's okay.
Actually, I read the Ease of Doing Business in 2005. Indonesia
Oh, you did?
is Indonesia is actually better, not much better with Vietnam. Vietnam is actually has a problem in the property rights, something like that. But once they address that property rights, a basic regulation for property rights, that's it. They're becoming even the operational efficiencies is much higher than Indonesia.
Yeah.
So this is not enough that Indonesia getting better.
Yeah.
We have to be better more.
Yeah, because everybody else is also...
We always talk about Vietnam, right? Yeah. We're getting better for sure for utility services and everything, but we are not getting better more than Vietnam.
Yes. Yeah, that's the thing about the rankings, right? Not rankings. I can't use the word rankings. Comparisons. So anyway, we ended on an optimistic note, and thank you to everyone for listening. And hopefully we will be moving forward in a very positive manner to implement the different areas of action that has come out from this report. So thank you to the World Bank, thank you to Norman, and hopefully we will continue to see work done to improve this report, and it will at least expand in terms of the number of countries that can be used as a comparison. Thank you so much, everybody, and a round of applause for our wonderful panelists.
Thank you, Ibu Mari, for guiding and moderating this exceptional panel discussion. We are about to have our Q&A session with Ibu Mari and our panelists, and we are also would like to invite in a moment Mr. Norman to the stage to join the panelists and Ibu Mari. And we already collected your questions through Slido. And I will address to the panel here. I will be joining the panelists here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Norman, for joining with the panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, let's start with the Q&A session. All good? Okay, we already have on the screen to Norman, to Mr. Loaiza. Okay, this one. What do countries with great digital public services usage, especially in taxations, have in common to boost the utilization of their digital platforms? Do they make it compulsory, give rewards or incentives to those who use it, or punish or disincentive those who doesn't? Thank you. Yeah.
Such an interesting question. I actually wanted to talk about digitalization. So as you may have noticed, we pay a lot of importance on digitalization of public services, and including in the area of taxation. And the way we see it is that digitalization can improve the efficiency of the tax administration, and can also make it easy for firms to comply with their taxes. So we do it we see that countries that perform the best are those that are able to digitalize and at the same time streamlining the process. So there is this problem with digitalization. Actually, two problems. One is that it can be not user-friendly.
So if you have a digital platform that is not user-friendly, then it will not achieve its purposes. The other problem is that there may be the tendency of having the same manual processes, but just put online. So what that means is that you are just replicating whatever processes you have and making them digital. That is the wrong approach. The right approach is to first streamline, to make it more concrete, and in that way, make the best use of the digital adoption of that technology.
Thank you. Okay, next question. We will, okay, next question on the screen. Okay, next question is, what are the key strategies businesses should adopt to proactively adapt to regulatory changes, ensuring they stay ahead rather than reacting by accident? How can MSMEs, women-led businesses, better navigate evolving regulations, particularly in areas like finance, taxations, and digital compliance? Okay, who is going to answer this question, panelists?
Yeah,
okay.
Actually, this is on target. What Apindo is trying to do now is also very much involving SMEs. I mean, we understand that SMEs are the one that seems to be having the greatest lack in terms of informations and socialization on what's actually happening in the business climate. So we have actually now focus also on helping and assisting SMEs. We have a special group that really navigate to help MSME on addressing some of these issues, including tax, I mean, we have a whole program, of course, on digital literacy. We have an academy now that focuses on this. But also, what's important is, actually, we work very closely with the Ministry of SMEs. And recently, we said, one area, actually, when we look at the OSS, I think BKPM told me, the Ministry of Investment, on the OSS, actually, a lot of the SMEs are also having trouble with the OSS. This is mainly the SMEs. So this is a group that I think we need to really assist and provide more capacity, and therefore, for us in Apindo, we are really helping and assisting them in also finding areas in which they have difficulty or challenges at. And I think we talked specifically about existing regulations, like when we did the omnibus, for example, there is a special chapter on SMEs. So we have really consistently working and cooperate with them. But I think what is also important is they need a place in which, if they have issues, where do they go to? I think this is something, they're not digital savvy that can just go online and say, I have issue. No. So you need a place like a hotline or a thing in which they can be addressed. So besides also providing the right ecosystem to help them, but I think they need a link directly, and I think the Ministry of Investment now is also having a division specifically to address some of these SMEs issues.
If I may, I would like also to highlight the importance of this regulatory change from the regulator perspective. Regulatory change need to ensure there is no big changes that happens, but rather it has to be communicated by the regulators themselves, and also need to be prepared. They need to make sure that some preparations have been done by the business sector.
Terima kasih Bapak. Okay, next We move on to our next question. Okay, please. Okay, I would like to ask question to government, to Pak Iko. How do you see the Be Ready as a tool to support the government's program?
Okay, thank you so much for the question. So the Be Ready is actually give us the broad picture of what we are going to do, especially for how we can increase the business climate and making the business more favorable, as Pa Norman mentioned before, to the business sectors. So if we can see what in the Business Ready or in the Be Ready reports, we can now identify what are the weaknesses that we need to improve and we need to increase the capacity, and on what topics that we have already the strength. So then, even though we have a good grades in some of the topics, let's say, for example, in labor, but then it doesn't mean that we do not do anything in these topics. But then we have to increase all of those 10 topics just to create more better climate for the business sectors. So again, the Be Ready is a good tools to support, especially for the investment program, investment policy for Indonesia to reach 8% growth. Thank you.
Please, yeah, okay.
One just add on before Norman comes in is that we need to understand that when we talk about ministry, it involves many ministry. So ministry investment cannot do it alone, definitely. They're different, right? So I think when we talk about government, obviously this is related to many, many ministries. So I think as the coordinating Ministry of Economy, I think this is an area in which, you know, they also look at how will this help in many of the ministry doing the work together. Thank you.
Yeah, Norman, please.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to say that I am impressed very favorably by the formation of this action plan and possibly even a committee, a group of people that will be in charge of assessing the measurements provided, the data provided by Be Ready, and also having a plan for how to improve those indicators. This is very important.
Yeah.
If I may add one more thing, and this is about the regulatory impact assessment that the lady here told us about. I believe this is very important. I believe that for every regulation there should be an assessment as to the usefulness of it. But I want to go beyond that and say that actually what we need to have is also an assessment of the regulations that already exist. Not only the new ones, but also those that exist. And when we make this transition to digital, let's make sure that we do not replicate the mistakes of the analog regulations, but actually making that transition should imply more efficiency and more user-friendliness.
Norman, maybe just one thing. I don't know, Pak Bumari, whether that's an area that Worldbank can also support us in terms of making some, I mean, I think
I think it's the signal.
As well as he mentioned, but I think the government needs also support. So I don't know whether there's an area that Worldbank be able to help as well.
Well, it's part of a bigger digital agenda of the government, which we actually went to the World Bank. I mean, the World Bank is already helping the Home Affairs Ministry to improve the digital ID system. But the next step is having the the eKTP system. Now you have to have a single digital ID is the next step. And once you have that, you can have a great improvement in many things. But it will also help. It has to be linked to the digital payment, as you were saying earlier. And it has to be linked to all the other databases of the government. So the government is at the early stages, including core tax with the tax. Actually, we have been discussing with the World Bank to learn actually I think there was also a question earlier about Estonia, how did Estonia do it and so on. So we are going to hopefully learn from the World Bank lessons learned. How do you go to a digital economy, and how do you deploy the single digital ID to have improvement of delivery of public services, as well as improving the service for businesses. So this is a big agenda of the government, which we have been talking to the World Bank about.
Okay, thank you, Bu Mari. We still have several questions waiting. Okay. Our next question. Oh, to Ibu Sinta. From your perspective, does Indonesia have bargaining chips to navigate Trump's tariff threat? Thank you. Okay, silakan Ibu Sinta.
I love this question. I think every day they talk about how does Trump tariff will impact Indonesia. Yeah. So I think we need to first understand what we export to the US. I think that needs to be very clear. We do mainly export of garment, textile, shoes, furnitures. We do not export much of advanced manufacturing at all. So in terms of semiconductor, electronics, very minimal. So this is very, very important because of course the news is it will definitely impact Indonesia. I'm not saying it's not impacting Indonesia. But I think we need to understand, if the U.S. impose such high tariff to China, can Indonesia really take advantage? I think that's the question, right? Can this be an opportunity? And the other thing that I think is also important to note that we do have a GSP now, currently, and it's being reviewed. And I think that's something that is more concern to us about our GSP, because that really will help our exporters. In terms of the opportunity, I think, again, when we look at the kind of export, it seems we may not have as much, but it doesn't mean we don't have it at all. And I think we learned from the first Trump era that, yes, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, they're the one who take Vietnam especially. And they recently really focused a lot on the semiconductor, right? And I think Indonesia, we want to be, on the EV side. We want to be in battery. We also now government is focusing a lot on semiconductor. So I think the government note that we need to be there, right? But I think the process to be there will take time. And this is again going back with all this survey of the be ready. I think that's the question. Is Indonesia ready to be part of the supply chain and taking the opportunity? I think Trump era is here right now. We can no longer take our time. I mean, if we really want to be part of this and take these opportunities, yes, we have to, do our homework. And right now, I have to share that there are businesses that are already looking at shifting production hub. So Indonesia is part of the area that they're looking also for some of these shifts. And we do have, a lot of our industrial economic zone and so forth are now being, paid, they are being paid visit to explore some of this shift of production that are currently being looked at with some of the investors. But I think we need to, again, go back to a lot of this homework that is addressed by the survey. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ibu. Okay. We still have time for one more question? No? Okay. Okay, once again, give a round big applause for the panelists. Thank you very much for a very interesting Q&A session, Bapak Ibu sekalian. We would like to move on to our next agenda. Okay. Still waiting for some information, updating news. Okay, we would like to invite for the token of appreciation, Pak Habib Rab, lead economist, to come to the stage, and accompanied by Mr. Norman, to hand the token of appreciation to our moderator and panelists for 2 days. Yeah, we will need a moment to take out the tables so we can get a better view for the photo station. Mr. Norman, would you like to accompany? Thank you, Pak Habib Rab and Mr. Norman and all panelists and Ibu Mari. Let's take this opportunity for the photo session. And we also would like to invite Bapak Riyatno, Deputy. Please join the photo session, Bapak. Okay, we're still waiting for one more participant for the photo session, Bapak Riyatno. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, the first photo shoot, we have the formal pose, and then the second one maybe a little bit chit chat amongst the panelists. Yeah, okay, to make a more casual pose. Okay, for a better and more positive in the future. Okay. Thank you. You may return to your seat, ladies and gentlemen. Please give a big round of applause to our panelist and moderator. Thank you once again, Bapak dan Ibu. You may return to your seat. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to inform you that the exit door is, we have only one exit door. The one that opened right now. Thank you. Bapak Ibu, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of our event. Once again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much to everyone who has been involved in this event. And to see the report and related material, you can download by scanning the QR code, or you can get it the hard copy on the way out at the Worldbank Be Ready report desk. And for all the invited media, after this we will have a press conference on the 3rd floor in the Kirana room, lantai 3, Kirana room. That will be held in a moment. We hope that today's event has been beneficial for all of us. And to close this event, I, Claudia Lenke, bid farewell. Until we meet again next time, Thank you very much and have a great day ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, to enjoy your lunch, the lunch is served outside this ballroom. Thank you.